and portraits. Today I have Mrs. Irene Draper. She is probably best known for her work in the Draper Canyon Funeral Home for many years in Newton. And I'd like to welcome you to the program.
Thank you very kindly.
And I'm looking very much forward to talking with you.
It's a great privilege, I assure you.
Okay, maybe we could begin by having you tell us where you was born, where you grew up at, to give us a little bit of an idea.
I was born in Fort Wayne, Indiana, in March the 20th, 1894, which is a long time ago. And my father was in poor health, so we finally went to California, and Father picked oranges and lemons. And in the meantime, we had gone through Newton, and my mother was an orphan, and she had relatives here in Newton. And Papa thought he'd like to come back here, so he came back here. And because he was architect and inside fine finisher, Mr. Carl Norfoss, which is many years ago, asked my father if he would like to go in what they call the undertaking business at that time. And so he did. And my father started in the funeral work here, and I'm finished here. So I feel like it's been a great privilege.
How did you become interested in funeral work?
Well, my father passed the board when they first put a warning out to, not a warning, but they said that anybody who took care of the dead human body would have to come into Topeka and pass an examination. There was 300 men from Kansas. My father's license was 103. My license is 1091, so you see there's quite a few from that. And I was handicapped with my education, almost lost my eyesight. I told Papa that I'd like to be a nurse, and he said, well, sweetheart, if you want to do something, why don't you take up a funeral work? And I said, sure, I'd love that. So there was no schools then. It was 1912, and he sent to Topeka to the Board of Embalming and got me a great big book. And I studied that. Something like 600 questions in the back, and I think I could answer pretty well all of them. And I went before the board in 1917 of a class of 34. There was 17 of us passed, and I was one of the 17.
Were you the only girl in the class?
Yes.
Was there any other women embalmers at that time?
Not that I know of. Mother Gates in Kansas City might have been. She was a funeral director, but not an embalmer. And so they have told me that I was the first lady embalmer in the state of Kansas, which I don't know if that's authentic or not, but then that's what I've always been told.
When you first started working with embalming, how did you like it?
Well, to tell you the truth, I would have nightmares. I'd cry and cry at night, you know. And my father said, sweetheart, and I always thought it was so funny, we should cry at a birth and rejoice at a death. He died in the Lord. And he was a very good Christian man, and so that was the reason I got so I like it. Of course, we used to do all the embalming in the home. We didn't know what funeral home were at that time, so we did all the embalming in the home, horse and buggy. And I just learned to really love my work. I think it's, I have told many ministers, I think my work was just as important as the ministry, because Mr. Draper and I would be with the family from time, death, until burial. A minister comes and makes the arrangements, and expresses sympathy, but we, and I really have never been sorry of my 58 and a half years in funeral work.
How old was you when you got your embalming license?
Well, I pulled from my father. I got in. I should have been 18 and I wasn't. But through the pull of my father. I think I passed the board in the fall, and I would have been 18 in March. And that's where I got in, so that was...
I see. Had you helped your father before you got your license? Did you work out there with him?
Yes, but not too much. But after I got the license, I went on every call with him. And of course, we did all the work in the home, and we'd always have to take down the bed and so on and so forth, and then put up what we called, in those days, our cooling board. And it was just a big board, and the father had made, and then my mother made a beautiful white spray to put over that with lace and shirt and blood like that. We just leave the bodies, you know.
How did you go about embalming when you first started? What was it like?
Well, to me it was very interesting. To lots of other people, I don't think it would be. But you see, you have to have preservation of the body. And do you really want to know?
Yeah.
We would have to raise an artery and a vein, and we would aspirate enough blood that our embalming fluid would take the same course in the circulatory system that the blood did, and that would preserve the body. And you had to know how to do that.
Has embalming changed any since?
Yes. My father and I and my husband, Reverend Draper, we believed in perfect preservation. Today, I shouldn't say this, but today I think the young people don't take as much time. Some do. Some are very conscious and take time, but as a rule, you know, it's only for 2 or 3 days. And but our bodies that we took care of, I think you could, once they've been buried 15, 20 years, I think you could dig them up and you would still see. And of course, as soon as the air hits the body, it goes back to dust as the body interned it to be.
Yeah. Did embalming, you always hear as death as being kind of almost a creepy, gives you, it really spooks you. As a child, did it have any effect on your growing up, working around with the...
None whatsoever, no. Because I had a good Christian father, and he explained to me what death was. Well, the minute we're born, we'd start to die, my dear. And it's just when the Lord's through with us here on earth that he calls us home to live with him. If we live according to that in my prayers, that I hope I'm worthy to be called.
When you got married, what did your husband do before you were married?
I married a grocerman, and it was during our boom at Peabody. And Mr. River said, you can't come home. If you ever help your daddy in funeral work, you can't come home. Well, Father wasn't a very healthy man, and I promised him I'd help. So I went with the horse and buggy. I always helped my father. And we were called out in the country to have a service, and while we were there, we got a call. So Mother sent the hired hand with our supplies to this home, horse and buggy. And before we got through there, we had another call. And so Mr. Draper then, the grocery store was closed for the day, and he came out. Well, Papa and I hadn't had anything to eat since early morning, and I said to Papa, we're just going to ask these people for something to eat. And he said, oh, no, we couldn't do that. And I said, well, I'm going to because I'm hungry. So I asked him, and so they fixed us some toast and coffee. And Mr. Draper came in and seen that my father was kind of ill, and I was about out, and he said, well, if that's the way my wife and my father-in-law to do, I guess I better take up the work. So he pitched right in helping. That's what and then my father made a very fine embalmer and funeral director out of him. Very fine.
So it became a husband and wife?
Become the husband and wife team, yes. I was in the public eye for 58 and a half years.
How many children did you have?
I have 3 birth children, and we've raised a couple of children that weren't fortunate enough to have a home.
Did you do embalming while the children were small?
Sure. I always had someone, the mother took care of them, or somebody good to leave them with. But while I carried my children, no, I never did, because the fluid's so strong that it wouldn't do to go in the bottom of while you were carrying a child.
How did your children react to the embalming, the funeral?
Neither one of them. Well, our son David, Mr. Draper wanted him to be a funeral director, and he was in college at Lawrence, and he flunked. And so the dean of college said, well, David, you're a good student. How come he flunked chemistry? And he said, my father wants me to be a licensed embalmer, but my mother says I should do what I want to. So they give him an aptitude test, and he is in speech and hearing now at Wichita, at the School of Orthopedics. And Wanda Lee, the one that we sold the business to, Jack Cannon knows our son-in-law, she hated the business, and I thought, she never would do it, but she's doing a beautiful job over there with her husband. The Draper Cannon Funeral Home. Of course, it was known as the Draper Funeral Home until we sold to them.
Did they ever watch you do it? Did any of them ever try and help you?
Never.
There was just no interest?
No interest whatsoever. Mr. Draper did. He was very fine. However, he wasn't a licensed embalmer. He was a licensed funeral director. But my father taught him how to embalm. He was a very fine embalmer. But the children never took any interest, no.
How did you see a difference in funerals from like when you first started in embalming to funerals when you quit? Was there a change in the way funerals were conducted, or?
Oh, yes. Very definitely. See, we used to always have a funeral in the home or a little country church or something like that. Now we have a funeral home, and when we built this funeral home over here in Broadway, I met with the Ministerial Alliance, and I had this funeral, I should say, my husband and I, had this funeral home dedicated to God in this community. And it's a very sacred place, it really is.
What was their reactions? Was that a common thing to have the funeral home dedicated?
No. I think we're the only one that ever had it dedicated to God in this community, but I don't know. My work always felt like it was a very important Christian work to the service of humanity. And I talked to my husband, and he felt the same way, so we just asked the Ministerial Alliance, and they were very gracious, and they said they would certainly have a dedication.
Did you have any other interests besides your embalming that you enjoyed?
Oh, I've always been a very busy woman. I used to do a lot of crocheting and knitting because you take 200 or 300 people and try to make them do what you want them to do and so forth. I've often made the nasty remark that I think they're better. You can herd cattle better than you can people. So you get nervous, and your customer's always right, and you have to have that smile on and all. So I took up embroidering and crocheting and knitting.
Did you ever have any interesting experiences in your work that you would like to share with us?
Many, but I don't know which one to share.
You can share more than one.
Can you? I don't know which one to share. I will tell you about when Mr. Draper was sick 5 years before he passed on with a heart condition, and a very, very, very wealthy man called from Wichita, no names, and he said, "Mrs. Draper, do you know how to conduct services?" And I told him how long I'd been in the business, and I said, "We are a pleasure to serve you if you wish us. If not, well, that's just all right too." But he decided that from my conversation that maybe I did know a little about it, Well, he came up, and they went into the card room and I went in one morning, and he just had all the thank you cards, and I asked him, I said, "Sir, why?" And he said, "I just want to see if you're up to date." And I said, "Yes, sir, you will get thank you cards with your initial on it." And they wouldn't even ride with me to the cemetery because I guess they thought I was driving Model T Fords. Mr. Draper laughed at me, and at the cemetery during the committal service, this lady insisted on talking. I put my arm around her and said, "If just a minute, and I will go back to the church with you and take your flowers where you want them to go." So she hushed up until we went back, and she wouldn't ride with my car and things. So when I get back to the church, he came in, and my husband was there, and he said, "Oh, I see you folks drive Cadillacs." I said, "Yes, sir, and we have 2 more in the garage at home." My husband he said he just couldn't hardly help but just breaking down and laughing to think that, but when people are that way, I don't know why they are, but people are. You know that. You're just young, but you'll find out that you have to stand up for your own rights.
There's an interesting story about the birth of your first daughter. Would you want to tell about it?
Well, I don't know whether she'll like this or not. I didn't bring the clothes as you wanted me to because I knew she wouldn't like it, but...
if you don't want to, that's okay.
Well, I was pregnant with twins, and I lost her twin into the 5th month, and she was born the 7th month. She weighed 1 pound and 3/4. I put this ring over her hand, went to her elbow, and carried her on a pillow and fed her with the medicine dropper. And the day that she was a year old, she weighed 12 pounds. She walked when she was 18 months old. She's a very, very fine wife, mother, and grandmother now. She lives here in Newton. Very proud of her, but she's never been, what you say, a real strong girl.
Was it normal for a child that small at that time to make it without?
No, it just was not normal in any way, shape, or form. But Mr. Draper was still in the grocery business, and we'd laugh and we said the reason Phyllis lived because Mr. Draper saw her and he said, "Oh, doctor, come quick, this baby's breathing." And the doctor said, "Oh, she isn't." And when he found out she was, Mr. Draper just got in a carload of onions and onion baskets, went down the back of the grocery store and put the onions out of the onion basket. We put pillows and everything like that, and I kid Phyllis, I said, "No wonder you lived. He was raised in an onion basket."
You sang also. Would you want to, how did you get interested in music?
Well, I was always interested in music. I took piano for some time, and my teacher said, "You'll be a music critic, but you'll never learn to play the piano. You'll learn to sing, but you..." And I am a music critic, and I don't know, I learned to sing, and I sang in the Lutheran choir at Peabody. I was a solo obligato. And then when I got my funeral work, why, they charge $5 to $10 for a soloist. And Mr. Draper used to say, "Well, my wife squawks pretty good and she'll sing for you." So that's where I got to singing for 9/10 of the funerals, which I enjoyed very much. God gave me a voice and I used it.
How did you know what to say to the people who had lost a loved one?
May I quote my father? He said to me one day, "Irene, you sure were called by God for your work." And I said, "Why do you think so, Papa?" And he said, "I have listened around the corner when you take a loved one to see their loved dead one, you know." And he said, "God just must put words into your mouth because you don't know what you say." And I think that is very true. And he taught me to say a little prayer. Would you like to hear it? Dear Heavenly Father, as I go out in the missionary work this day, please put words into my mouth to the glory of this family, to the glory of you, to the comfort of this particular family. Isn't that a sweet prayer?
Yeah. When you first started out with funeral work, as far as like prices, how have you seen prices change for a funeral?
Terrible, terrible, terrible. Oh yes, funerals are about 3 times now what they were when I started. And when we started in, we used to have more baby caskets than we did adults because they just didn't know how to save these babies. And the medical profession has certainly gone by leaps and bounds because it's very seldom we have a baby. But we embalm them. I don't try to embalm them, so they look just like little wax dolls.
Did you ever work on someone you knew personally?
Oh, my dear, yes. Most all living in Peabody since 1899. Most all of my were my close friends. And it was hard, but then I felt like I was doing God's work and to make them as lifelike for their loved ones as I could.
I see. Can you think ever of an incident when it was about the hardest for you to work on?
Many of them. My closest friends, of course, it was hard. But if you are in service to the Master, you have to put those things aside and do His work. And that's the way I felt.
How did you feel about, was it harder to relate to some families than others? What was the types of families you encountered with?
A family who believed in God were very, very easy to relate to. But you'd be surprised how many families don't believe in God. And those were the families that were just very, very trying because you would just ask God to put words into your mouth to help them to see. And death is just as natural as life. It's just as natural as life. We know that we all have to take that journey someday.
How about as far as like the make of the caskets? How have you seen that change? since you started, or has there been any difference?
Oh yes, they make steel caskets, not what they call a steel sealer, and they make wood caskets and things like that. And there's been a great advancement in our work, great advancement in our work, and also in the burials too. They used to just bury a loved one in the casket, and so many cemeteries have water now to bury in a vault. I've always said if there wasn't enough money, embalm me and put me in a vault, because I want to be protected from the violence of the earth.
Did you ever, as far as like the embalming, did people react to you different because you were a woman? Ever? Do you feel that when you started out they didn't?
No, I don't think so. I think it was just the same as anyone being a nurse or a doctor, anything like that, you know. And I was a professional woman, and I think people recognized me as such. However, I never held on my sleeve that I was any better than anybody else, because I was humble about my work.
How did your teachers, when you took your test at Wichita, at Topeka, how did they react to a woman embalmer in the class?
Some of the professors were, they were testing me to see if I knew how, and one professor said, well, Miss Baker, can you embalm a body? And I said, sir, if you'll give me the instruments, I would be very glad to do so. He said, where are you going to start? And I said, I'm going to go into the axillary, under the arm. I didn't have to embalm anyone. He knew that I knew my work, you know.
Did you ever regret not being able to be a nurse?
Never. I wouldn't be a nurse if they'd pay me $1,000 a day. But I've loved my work.
What made you give up the funeral home business? Did you just decide to retire?
No, you see, my husband was sick, and he passed on in 1970. And he said, excuse me, he said 58 and a half years in the public is enough. He said, Mom, I want you to retire. So then we sold the business to our youngest daughter and her husband, you know. And I miss it. I even miss it today, although Mr. Draper's been gone 10 years. Of course, I'm not able to do it now at my young age.
What have you done? What have you taken up any other hobbies since you?
A lot of knitting. I can still see. I'm losing my eyesight, as I've told you. But I still can see to knit until I just open my big mouth and say, buy me some yarn, I'll make you an afghan. So I keep busy. Now, I think you have to keep busy I wouldn't want to just sit and twiddle my hands. I want to be busy.
You received the Woman of the Year award?
Yes, I received the Woman of the Year award in, Mr. Draper passed away in 1970, and I received that in 71.
Would you want to tell about it, what it was like to...
Well, I was certainly surprised when they told me I was Woman of the Year in business and professional, and very happy to think I was recognized. I thought that was a great, great honor. And now our Woman of the Year luncheon will be in April. And of course, all the women who have been Women of the Year are invited to the luncheon. I think Grandma will dress up in a formal and go.
What is there that you want to do yet?
I would like to do, but I know that I can't, but I think that I'm qualified to talk to the bereaved. Not to the bereaved, but the terminally ill. I have talked to a couple that was called in, and I personally think that with my 58 years and a half of experience, that I could talk to the terminally ill, and death wouldn't be such a horror as it has been, you know. But of course, I can't do that because I don't drive a car anymore. Look on my eyes, and I couldn't do it. But that's what I've always thought. If I could, I would like that.
Have you seen people's reaction to death, the whole attitude to death, change since you started out working in the funeral home?
Death is death, dear. Death is death. But there is no death. I tell my patrons there is no death. What makes me walk and talk is the breath of God. And I move out of this old house, which will decay, but I will never die, because Jesus said on the cross to their feet, this day shall thou be with me in paradise. So to me, there is no death. It's just leaving this body and going to a higher realm.
I see. It was for a while there that death was something that was very hard to talk about. People, they would just rather not think about it. If someone was terminally ill, they didn't want to face it. Did you have problems with that in your funeral work when the death finally occurred, the family?
Oh yes, definitely. Family just go all to pieces. Why me, you know? And that's the reason I think my father said as I did, God put words in my mouth so I could talk to him and tell him there was no death. And I know I have been called many, many times to talk to children before their parents left, you know. And I don't know, I just feel like God has called me to my work, and I've enjoyed it very much.
There's a talk that there's a new thing coming out that says funerals are almost sacrilegious. They say that they should almost not be conducted. You should just bury, and the funerals just prolong the agony. How do you feel about that?
I don't feel that way at all. I don't feel it. I think that when I was taught, I went to every convention afterwards, and we always listened to lecture, and our lecturer would say, be sure and have your family, the bereaved, look at their loved one. Because then it's a reality that they really are gone, and then tell them there's no death, you know, and all. And I think the world knows that there is no death, and the world knows that death is life. You know, it's just natural. We can't live forever.
How did people react to you at first when they found out you worked with embalming when you were younger?
All of them said, why you're doing that? You know, they were just amazed that a young girl should like that work. But I told them that I just liked it. And I kept my education. I had to have an education, so.
We're by time, but what type of person would you recommend going into embalming? What does an embalmer or a funeral director, is there certain qualities, personality traits that they need to have?
Well, I should say that if I were to choose them, I'd choose a person who loved the Lord and realized that death was natural, and to be sincere in their work and not make light of it. I know I never would, in the embalming room, I never would allow a lot of jesting and loud talking, because that's a sacred place. Like Papa used to say, that's almost the home of the departed soul, which it is, you know. And I think you'd have to be dedicated to your work and like your work. Definitely.
Okay, well, we're about out of time, and I'd really like to thank you for coming today.
You're just most welcome, my dear, and I hope that I've said the things that are pleasing to you than I should have said.
It was real well. Thanks a lot for coming.
You bet.
And thank you for tuning in to Portraits.